So hello students, welcome to Vedantu NEET English. This is Baswaraj sir, your biology master teacher. In today's lecture, we'll be learning about the chapter Plant Kingdom. When I say Plant Kingdom, this video is gonna be exclusively talking about here the different types of classification as well as certain terminologies, and we'll be learning about your algae in detail today with NCERT line by line, and also certain questions towards the end of the video. So this is going to be the video which will make you a complete master when it comes to algae, and you do not have to even worry about it. And students, before we start the lecture, let me tell you the entire notes will be available on the Telegram channel. So before we start, quickly tell me in the chat if my voice is audible to all of you and the presentation behind me is visible to each and every one of you. I hope it is visible to everyone. Yes. Now students, I want everyone quickly, first of all, mark your attendance by smashing the like button. After you mark your attendance, let's get into it. Now students, when we talk about the chapter Plant Kingdom, all of us need to know this Plant Kingdom was a part of your 5 kingdom classification. It was a part of 5 kingdom classification. Now quickly tell me in the chat who was the person who gave the 5 kingdom classification. It was none other than your R.H. Whittaker. So R.H. Whittaker gave your 5 kingdom classification. Now he classified the entire organisms into 5 kingdoms. That is kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Animalia, and kingdom Plantae. So 5 kingdoms. But students, initially your plant kingdom was not very simple. In fact, it was very complex. I'll give you a quick example. The quick example is the fungi. The fungi or fungus initially belonged to kingdom Plantae. Initially they belonged to kingdom Plantae. But later on, for the obvious reasons, that could be the mode of nutrition. Because all of us know the mode of nutrition in the case of your kingdom Plantae is your autotrophic mode of nutrition. But in the case of fungi, the mode of nutrition was saprophytic mode of nutrition. So in later stages, your fungi was removed from kingdom Plantae and it had a separate place called as kingdom fungi. Separate place. Similarly, your lichens. Initially, lichens also belong to your kingdom Plantae. All the lichens also belong to kingdom Plantae. But later on, it was replaced to your kingdom fungi. Later on, lichens were replaced to kingdom fungi. So all of you remember something called as cyanobacteria. Do all of you remember something called as cyanobacteria? Yes. This is the same cyanobacteria. We also call it blue-green algae. Yes, we call it blue-green algae. But this blue-green algae is everything but an algae. It is everything but an algae. And this cyanobacteria, also called as your blue-green algae, actually belongs to kingdom Monera. It belongs to kingdom Monera, technically under eubacteria. So your kingdom Plantae is very complex and everything. So before we understand your kingdom Plantae, I want everyone to understand something called as the classification. Now, tell me, in the ancient times, in the starting stages of the earth, when the humans were evolving and everything, do you think they classified plants based on the internal structure? Obviously not. Did they classify plants based on how they look in the starting stages? No. Then how did they classify plants? For example, all of you are walking in a park. Imagine you do not know anything about plants. And you're just walking in a park. Okay, I'm going in a park. I'm walking in a park. Now you find one plant. And you try to eat that plant. Okay. If a plant is, you are able to eat a plant, or for example, its roots, stem, or its fruit, the plant is considered edible. That is one type of classification. Imagine you're walking in a park again, and you eat a plant, and you try to feel a little sick. That is, a plant is said to be poisonous. Yes, it is poisonous in nature. Let me write space for everything else. It is poisonous in nature. That is one type of classification. Now imagine, again you're walking in a park and you try to find a different plant which has certain medicinal applications. You call that plant medicinal value. So the initial classification of plants was based on utility. That is, if a plant is edible, we call it edible plant. If a plant is poisonous, we call it poisonous plant. Or if a plant is said to be medicinal value, we call it a medicinal plant. That was your ancient classification. But later on, as we grew as humans and we try to observe the external beauty, as we try to observe the external beauty of a plant, there came a new classification. And if you call this classification something called as artificial classification. In this artificial classification, according to the line of NCERT, this artificial classification was mainly based on gross, superficial, morphological, characters. Gross, superficial, morphological characteristics. Now this was after, this type of artificial classification was actually after the herbs, shrubs and trees. We have herbs, shrubs and trees, but this was after herbs, shrubs and tree classification. Now what is this gross, superficial, morphological characters? In this we classify the plants. Based on how they look from the outside. We tell, right, never judge a book by its cover. But here we are judging the book by its cover. That is, we are trying to classify a plant based on how it looks from the external morphology. For example, it could be the habitat, or it could be the flower color, or it could be the leaves. That is, when I talk about leaves, it could be number of leaves, or structure of leaf. All of these are different morphological characteristics which we observed and we classify the plants. Now one more was there, that is based on the andrecium structure. Now what is this based on andrecium structure? This based on andrecium structure was given by your none other than Carl Linnaeus. Carl Linnaeus told that yes, if andrecium is joined together, or if it is joined to a single bundle, monoidalphous, joined to two bundles, diidalphous. So all these were different types of classification. So when we classify an organism based on how it looks from the outside, it becomes artificial. Classification system that classifies organisms on the basis of only one or few special chosen morphological features, that is called as artificial system of classification. But students, we tell, right, the true beauty of a person is from the inside, not from the outside. Do we tell that? Yes. So true beauty is from the inside, and the true beauty was actually seen by two scientists called as Bentham and Hooker. Bentham and Hooker are two scientists who told that, wait a minute, let's not look at the outside external morphology. Why don't we see inside a plant? And that gave birth to your natural system of classification. In natural system of classification, we classify organisms on the basis of not just external morphology, but also from the internal anatomy, but also the internal features. The internal features mainly includes the cytotox, right? The ultrastructure, anatomy, embryology, and also phytochemistry. What is this phytochemistry? Phytochemistry is nothing but the different type of chemicals it releases a plant. So first, what do we have? The first one, we have your artificial system of classification. in artificial system of classification, we only look at the external morphology, yes, which includes habitat, color, number and shape of the leaf. And then we have the natural system of classification, which looks at the internal beauty, which includes ultrastructure, anatomy, embryology and phytochemistry. This is the basis of your classification. Now one might ask, one question will come, sir, we had natural, so we had artificial system of classification. Why did we require, what was the requirement of natural classification? Why was it required again? Answer is very simple. Because your natural system of, your artificial system of classification had certain drawbacks. Now what are these drawbacks? Very simple. Now I'll give you a quick example. Now I'm asking you to identify a plant. I'm asking you to identify a plant based on the flower. Now, will the flower will be present on throughout the life cycle of a plant? No. I'll give you one more example. I'm trying to identify a plant based on the leaf structure and the number of leaves. When the spring season is there, okay, I'm able to see the entire leaf structure and number of leaves. But what about in autumn season? Will the leaf still be there? No. All the leaves will fall down, right? So what is the meaning of this? The biggest drawback for your artificial system of classification was that the external characteristics can change. It can change depending on environmental factors. So based on environmental factors, your external beauty can change. So can we use your artificial system of classification all the time? No, it has a major drawback. So we stick to natural system of classification. But your natural system of classification does not account for or does not consider phylogenetics. Where is the evolution relationship? For that very reason, we have the phylogenetic system of classification. What do we have? Phylogenetic system of classification. And your phylogenetic system of classification is based on evolutionary relationship. That is, it tells you that, for example, one taxa can belong to a similar ancestor. One taxa can belong to one organisms belonging to one taxa. Many organisms belong to the same taxa will have a common ancestor. They'll have a very common ancestor. That is, all the different plants might have come from a common ancestor. So all that we took account in the phylogenetic system of classification. All the evolutionary relationships. We are looking into the past basically. We are looking into the past. Now, how do we look into the past? Can we take a time machine and go to the past and check? No. How can we do it then? The most simple reason, the best way to find the phylogenetic relationship is fossil records. It is the fossil records. You look at the fossil records and you tell me, yes, this plant and this plant are related and they have a very common ancestor. Two related plants with a common ancestor. That is a fossil. Now what if a particular plant does not have any fossil records at all? All the fossil has been destroyed or the fossil were never formed at all. What do you do in that case? If there is no fossil, in that case you do some other techniques such as your numerical taxonomy, cytotaxology or chemotaxonomy. These are the important points or important techniques available when there are no fossil evidence. When there is no fossil evidence, a scientist has to consider numerical taxonomy, cytotaxonomy and chemotaxonomy. Now what is this numerical taxonomy, sir? Very simple. Basically what you do is, you take two different characters, you take one character here, second character here. For example, we have plant A and plant B. Plant A has your axial placentation. Plant B also has axial placentation. But the plant C has your parietal placentation. So you number it 2. Now you try to arrange both of them. Do a relationship. This is joining somewhere here. So based on the characteristics, based on the number of characteristics, you assign a number and you take all this number and you run it through a computer, and eventually you get a particular graph or a flow chart which will help you to find the phylogenetic system, right? Help you to find the relationship. Your cytotoxicity. Cytotoxicity is very simple. It deals with the chromosome behavior, chromosome number, chromosome shape, everything to do with the chromosome. Everything to do with the chromosome. Clear? Chemotaxonomy deals with the chemicals again. It could be a primary and secondary metabolites. All of you know primary and secondary metabolites, right? Of the plants. That is under chemotaxonomy. So that is your history of classification. Phylogenetic system of classification. We have your artificial system of classification and natural system of classification. So any doubt till here? Ask me quickly. Any doubt till here, students? Sir, inside the cortex, xylem and phloem, or inside the stem, xylem and phloem, you are asking me xylem and phloem comes into which part, right? So cortex and phloem. Inside of the stem have the xylem and phloem. Yes, inside the stem there will be xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem needs conduction of water, right? It will be there. And cortex is technically part of your stem and root also. So cortex is the middle part, right? Cortex is the middle part of your particular sectioning. Okay. Now let's understand your entire plant kingdom. So how we know your entire organisms are divided into kingdom Monera, kingdom Protista, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Animalia, kingdom Fungi. Your plant kingdom can also be further classified into many categories, right? Many different types. We have thallophytes, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms. But in today's class, we'll be focusing on thallophyte. And thallophyte, let me tell you, under thallophyte, we have your algae. We have the algae. Initially under thallophytes, we also had lichens and fungi. But right now under thallophytes, the main organism is going to be algae. Now why do we call it thallophyte? Let me tell you in the next 2 minutes. Why do we call it a thallophyte? The meaning of thallophyte or thallophyte is called as because it has a thalloid body. It has something called as a very thalloid body. Now what is the meaning of thalloid body? The meaning of thalloid body is that it does not have a proper root, stem or leaf-like structure. That is, there is no differentiation between root, stem and leaf. Let me tell you starting first of all. Quickly tell me in the chat if algae is supposed to be prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Can anyone tell me? Algae, is it prokaryotic or eukaryotic? A simple question. Yes, exactly. Your algae is technically eukaryotic in nature. It is eukaryotic in nature. It means it has a true nucleus, it has a well-defined nucleus, it has a nuclear envelope, and also this particular cell will be having membrane-bound organelles. That is your eukaryotic in nature. Now the same algae can be unicellular. It can be unicellular or it can be multicellular. It can be unicellular as well as multicellular. Unicellular example is very simple. Unicellular example is chlorella, chlamydomonas. Multicellular are other types of algae. You learn about one by one. Sargassum, giant kelps, Urothryx, right? Volvox, all of them come under multicellular in nature. So as we discussed already, it is thalloid in nature. What is the meaning of thalloid, students? The meaning of thalloid is that root, stem and leaf are not well differentiated. Can I say no true root? No true root, stem and leaves. No true root, stem and leaves. I'll just write leaf. right? No true root and stem leaf. Why? Because all of them are very merged. They are not well differentiated. Not well differentiated at all. Okay. Now, what about the mode of nutrition? What about the mode of nutrition? Listen to me very carefully. In the entire plant kingdom, the main mode of nutrition is photosynthesis. It is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the main mode of nutrition in your entire plant kingdom because of presence of chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll A is the main photosynthetic pigment which is present throughout your plant kingdom. Okay, clear all of you? Yes. So students, if you're able to make the notes and if you're able to understand the plant kingdom, quickly smash that like button. And this entire PDF will be available. On Telegram channel. That is Baswaraj Sir Biology. Entire PDF will be available there. Okay. Now, that is mode of your nutrition. Now, what about the habitat? What about the habitat? Where do you find them? Students, listen to me very carefully. The main habitat for your entire algae is going to be aquatic. It is going to be what? Aquatic in nature. It is aquatic in nature. It could be both. It could be either fresh water. It could be either fresh water or marine. Or it could be marine in nature. Fresh water or it could be marine in nature. That is your habitat. Now, apart from this, there are other places also. There are other places where we can find your entire algae. Can anyone remind me, apart from your aquatic habitats, can we find them in certain moist soils? Yes. So your particular algae can be found on the moist soil or even certain rocks. Moist soil or certain rocks, or it can be found on wood. Yes, on certain wood also we can find them. They'll be like growing on the wood. They can be in a symbiotic relationship with a fungi. Yes, fungi plus an algae. That is nothing but your lichen. Right? Now, apart from this, there is one more example that is going to be your animals. Some algae can also be growing on certain other animals also. They can be found on other animals. The example given in your NCERT is going to be sloth bear. Yes, it can be found on your sloth bear also. Clear? So it is eukaryotic in nature. It can be unicellular, multicellular in nature. Thalloid body, it means what? No true root, stem and leaf. Mode of nutrition is photosynthetic because of chlorophyll A. Habitat is going to be aquatic, mostly freshwater or marine. Apart from aquatic, it can also be found in your moist soil or rocks, wood, and also in a symbiotic relationship with a fungi that is called as your lichen, and also on certain animals. Example is sloth bear. So these are all the habitats or the general information about your algae. Right? Now, apart from the general information, what about the size and shape? Students, remember this very carefully. Your algae can vary from a unicellular organism, all the way from a tiny dot, such a minute condition, to growing 100 meters tall. It can grow up to 100 meters tall. Example is going to be your giant kelps. They are 100-meter tall, long. I have a picture of that. I'll show you. Small picture of that. So it can grow up to 100 meters tall. Giant kelp in nature. Yes, giant kelp. So this is your Chlamydomonas, which is unicellular in nature. Yes, and we have your filamentous algae. Yes, we have certain filamentous algae. Examples are very important. In filamentous of algae, we have Ulothrix as well as Spirogyra. Yes, Ulothrix as well as Spirogyra. Then we have Chara here. This is not Chara. This is Alva. Not in your NCERT, don't remember this. Then we have your colonial algae. That is your... One second, students. Oops. the mic dropped. We have the colonial algae, such as your volvox. Now, sir, what is this colonial algae? Is it in a colony? Yes, it is in a colony. It is like in a big apartment. It is like in a big apartment, right? Big apartment. So this is an entire apartment. In this apartment, there are many different organisms are going. So it is a colonial algae. It is called as a colonial algae. Any doubt till here? Ask me quickly. Any doubt till here? Ask me. Yes, Gayatri. Yes, Raj. Tejaswini. Raj, NEET dreamer, girl. Swetha, Satvi. Any doubt till here? Ask me quickly. Your size and shape of a particular algae. Mode of nutrition we already learned. It is said to be photosynthetic in nature. It is photosynthetic in nature, right? Photosynthetic in nature. Now, what about the reproduction in algae? How do organisms reproduce? Algae. How do they reproduce? Students, remember this very carefully. Your entire algae can reproduce in three different methods. The first one is called as your vegetative method, in which we have something called as fragmentation, where one plant body, one algae will split into two, and each individual algae will grow into an adult. See, Spirogyra. Example is Spirogyra. Then we have something called as asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, it mainly happens by formation of spores. So your algae will try to produce spores. Example is going to be your Chlamydomonas. Which produces a spore which is motile in nature. It is motile in nature because of presence of flagella. So we have flagellated spores called as zoospores. Zoospores are your motile spores. Now, what about the spores where the flagella is completely absent? Such spores are called as aplanospores. We call them aplanospores. Clear? We call them aplanospores. Now, your particular algae can also undergo sexual reproduction. Yes, an algae can undergo sexual reproduction. That is fusion of two gametes. But here we are very special, because the gametes can change in shape now, or they can be very different, or they can be motile or non-motile also. So your entire sexual reproduction is further classified into three categories. The first category is called as your isogamy. What is this iso? Iso means what? Same. Gamy means fusion. Iso means same. Gamy means fusion. So isogamous means what? Fusion of gametes which are same to each other, which are similar to each other. Fusion of gametes which are similar in nature. Now, listen to me very carefully. I'm going to write it also for you, because it is very important. Example is very important here. For example, if the gametes are motile, if the gametes are going to be motile, that is, in under isogamous, if the gametes are motile, example is going to be Eulothrex. Clear? Now, if the gametes are said to be non-motile, that is, gametes might be same, they are isogametes, but they are non-motile in nature. If they are very non-motile in nature, we call the example is going to be Spirogyra. Clear, all of you? Example is Spirogyra, where the gametes which are very same to each other, but they are non-motile. It means the flagella is absent. The example is going to be Spirogyra. Now, what about anisogametes? Anisogametes is the fusion of gametes which are dissimilar to each other. Can you see? One is a bigger gamete, one is a smaller gamete. That is dissimilar. Example is going to be Eudorina. Now the next one is very simple. That is oogamy. Under oogamy, there is one large gamete and one small gamete. And the large gamete is the female gamete. Just like in the case of humans, ova is much more larger compared to the sperm, right? Similarly, under oogamy, the female gamete is very large and non-motile, just like the ova. And the male gamete is small and motile. Male gamete is going to be small and it is going to be motile. That is, it will have a flagella. Example is volvox and fucus. Volvox and fucus. So all of you will remember this. Under your section, under your reproduction, we have your vegetative, fragmentation, spirogyra example. Asexual example is chlamydomonas, spore formation. Which type of spores? Zoospore formation. Chlamydomonas. Under sexual reproduction, that is fusion of gametes. Divided into three categories. We have isogamy, that is gametes are similar. If it is motile, ulothrix, non-motile, spirogyra. Then under anisogamous, it is gametes are dissimilar. Example is eudorina. Under oogamous, gametes are dissimilar again, but the female gamete is large and it is non-motile, just like the ova, as well as your male gamete is small and it is motile. Example is going to be volvox and fucus. Volvox and fucus. All of you will remember this. Very easy, students. This chapter is very easy. You just need to know the cycles and you will be set in this chapter. Now, see, this is a diagram of your NCERT, which is given in NCERT. This is volvox and this is your ulothrix. Volvox, which is colonial algae, see parental colony and daughter colony inside. And this is filamentous algae, that is ulothrix. Now students, I want all of you to, this will come back to later on. That is brown and as well as the red will come to later on. Now let's understand the cell wall, all of you. Can we understand the cell wall of a particular algae? Can we start? Yes sir, we can start. Students, the cell wall is very peculiar here. The cell wall is very different here. For example, let me show you one quick example. Imagine now, for example, if this is your entire cell wall of an algae, right? So let me tell you, this outer layer is your cell wall. Outer layer is going to be your cell wall. Okay, outer layer is going to be cell wall. The inner layer is going to be what? Plasma membrane. It's going to be plasma membrane. Okay, it's plasma membrane. Now, can we focus on cell wall now? Can we focus on the cell wall? Let's see deeply into let's focus on the cell wall. If you look at the structure of cell wall, it somewhat looks like this. This is your cell wall. This is your entire cell wall. Now, on the outer side of the cell wall, here, on the outer side of the cell wall, we have certain type of chemical deposition. Now, this chemical deposition is called as hydrocolloidal substance. Called as what? Hydrocolloidal substance. Now, what is hydrocolloidal substance? Listen to me very carefully, all of you. Listen to me very carefully. Now, on the outside wall of the cell wall, there is something called as hydrocolloidal substance, right? This is a substance which will make sure that algae doesn't dry out. I'll give you a quick example. Imagine what is the major habitat of your algae. The major habitat of your algae is nothing but your aquatic. In aquatic, we have something called as high tide and low tide. So whenever there is low tide, there is a small chance that the algae might be exposed to the direct sunlight. Yes, algae might be exposed to direct sunlight. To make sure the algae is moisturized and it is maintained properly, we have something called as hydrocolloidal substances. These hydrocolloidal substances will make sure it holds water. It will hold water and it will keep the algae moisturized. Now similarly, this hydrocolloidal substance and the composition of your cell wall can vary. It can vary based on the different type of algae. For example, what about your green algae? In the case of your green algae, it is made up of your cellulose plus pectin. Yes, it is made up of your cellulose plus pectin. Yes. Now, what about cellulose inner side, outside? We'll learn when we come to chlorophyceae, that is the green algae. But what about in the case of your brown algae? In the case of your brown algae, it is made up of cellulose plus algin. Cellulose plus algin. Now, what about red algae? Can anybody tell me in the chat? What about red algae? What is it made up of? In the case of your red algae, it has certain extra substance, something called as carrageen, and also polysulfated esters. So it has something called as cellulose plus carrageen, plus pectin to some extent, plus polysulfated esters. Polysulfated esters. So in the case of your green algae, we have your cellulose plus pectin. Brown algae, cellulose plus algin. In red algae, we have cellulose plus carrageen plus pectin plus polysulfated esters in many cases. That is the complete composition of your cell wall in the different types of algae. Any doubt here? Ask me quickly. Any doubt in the composition? Any doubt in what is the hydrocolloidal substance? This is your entire cell wall. Inside is your plasma membrane. If you focus on cell wall, it looks something like this. Clear? That is the entire detail about your cell wall. The next thing is the flagella. The next thing is your flagella. Now tell me in the chat, what is the main function of flagella? The main function of the flagella is motility. It is motility. For example, in the case of your green algae, the first thing you need to know here is green algae is motile in nature. But what is the type of flagella? What is the type of flagella in green algae? In the case of your green algae, your flagella is usually two and equal and also present at the apex like this from here. From here, the algae, if a flagella will come. From here, the flagella will arise. Let me show you. In case of your green algae, let me draw the diagram. It will look something like this. And from the apex region, looks like an alien, no? From the apex region, we have equal and apical algae, apical flagella. Equal. You see, it's equal in length. Both are equal in length, and it is at the apex. Now here I have drawn two. But it can range from 2 to 8 in number. Clear, all of you? Now, what about your brown algae? What about the case in the case of your brown algae? In the case of your brown algae, your flagella is a little weird. For example, it is sometimes in a pear-shaped or pyriform. We call it pear shape or pyriform. Okay, also call it pyriform in nature. Now, what happens to the algae here? What happens to the flagella? Flagella? In the case of your brown algae, flagella is laterally coming out. It is usually 2 in number. It is unequal and it is lateral in shape. Can you see? It is laterally coming out, it is unequal and it is 2 in number. Clear? Now, what about your red algae? Whatever flagella do you see in the red algae? In the case of your red algae, the flagella is completely absent. In the case of red algae, flagella is completely absent. You do not find any type of motility there. Clear? Any doubt in flagella? Now tell me, ask me quickly. Any doubt in flagella? green algae, brown algae and red algae. Now, what about pigment, students? Pigment is very, very important because a lot of questions have come from pigment itself. A lot of questions have come from just from the pigment. They can directly ask you pigment in your brown algae, pigment in your green algae, as well as pigment in the case of your red algae. Direct question can come. Let me tell you. First of all, tell me, pigment is a type of chemical. Yes, sir, it is a type of chemical which is mostly found where? It is mostly found in the case of your chloroplast, which is the type of your plastid. The type of your plastid. Now, in the case of your red algae, so in the case of your, let's grab green algae. Let's write green algae here. Let's write on entire algae, then we can tell easily. I'll show you a small trick also. Green, brown algae and red algae. Red algae. See, let me tell you first of all, chlorophyll A is a common pigment in all of them. Chlorophyll A is a common pigment in your in your green, brown as well as your red. Now apart from that, in the case of green algae we see chlorophyll B, here we chlorophyll B, chlorophyll C and chlorophyll D. Chlorophyll A is common, B, C as well as D. B, C, D. That is your entire pigments. Now apart from this, in the case of your brown algae, we have something called as your fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin as well as carotenoids. In the case of your red algae, we have something called as phycoerythrin. Phycoerythrin. Clear? And it is the phycoerythrin which imparts the red color. Fucoxanthin imparts the brown color here. That is going to be your entire pigments when it comes to your different types of algae. Now, what about your storage food? Obviously, the plant is preparing food. Here and there, the plant is preparing food. So, all the food needs to be stored somewhere. And how is it stored? Listen to me very carefully. In the case of, again, it's going to be very different in the case of your green, very different in the case of your brown algae, and in the case of your red algae. For example, in the case of your green algae, all the food material is stored in the form of starch as well as your oil droplets. In the case of brown algae, it is stored in the form of laminarin and mannitol. Laminarin as well as your mannitol. In the case of red algae, it is stored in the form of Floridian starch. Let me tell you one more extra point here, that this Floridian starch is actually like your amylopectin as well as your glycogen. Now, amylopectin and glycogen you might have learned somewhere, right? You will learn about amylopectin and glycogen in the case of your chemistry. In chemistry, you will learn about amylopectin, the linkage alpha 1,4 and alpha 1,6. In the case of your glycogen, I believe alpha 1,6 linkage is much more repeating, right? It is much more repeating, right? Yes, RBS edits, we'll be launching our own test series, and if you are part of DNA batch, you don't even have to buy any test series. If you have a DNA batch, you don't have to buy test series, because DNA batch students will be getting a free test series, all in a test series along with DNA batch. Okay, so don't worry about that. So any doubt here, ask me. Pigment is done. We did first cell wall, we did green, brown, red. Then we did about your flagella in the case of green, brown, red. Then we did about your pigment and storage in your entire thing. Now let's look at few NCERT lines if we did not miss out anything. Let's read the NCERT few lines here. We start off with your RH Whittaker, gave your 5 kingdom classification, Protista fungi. Then we learnt about your kingdom Plantae. Then we started off with your fungi, members of kingdom Monera and Protista having cell wall and now been excluded from the kingdom Plantae. I told you, fungi has been removed from your kingdom Plantae. I told you that. Then we also learned that your cyanobacteria is referred to blue-green algae are not algae. Your cyanobacteria belongs to kingdom Monera. It's not written here. It belongs to kingdom Monera. Yes. And you will be learning about your algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms in this chapter. For example, if you look closely here, it says that starting classification. See here, first one is going to be your, where is it given? Artificial system of classification based on your gross superficial morphological characters. Did we learn that? Yes, we learned that. Example, which type of morphological characters? We learned about habit, number and color of the and shape of the leaf, and all of these are vegetative characteristics. Apart from that, we also learnt about the andrecium structure, and that was given by your Carlinius. Yes. Then we learnt about your natural system of classification, which mainly dealt with the internal structure. Now, what was the drawback of your artificial? The drawback was that vegetative characteristics are more easily affected by the environment. Clear? Then we learnt about your natural system of classification included your anatomy, ultrastructure, embryology and phytochemical, and it was given by your Bentham and Hooker. Bentham and Hooker gave the natural system of classification. Then we had a phylogenetic system of classification where they told that same taxa have a common ancestor, right? And all of this information was available how? All of this information about your phylogenetic was available with the help of fossil evidence. Now, what if fossil evidence is not present? In the case where the fossil evidence is not present, we take the help of other evidences such as your numerical taxonomy, cytotaxonomy, which deals with your chromosome number, chromosome structure, and also chemotaxonomy, which mainly deals with the chemical nature. Then we started off with your algae. Yes, we started off with your algae. We learned it is chlorophyll bearing. Yes, it is photosynthetic in nature. It has chlorophyll A, I told you. Then it is thalloid in nature. What is the meaning of thalloid? The meaning of thalloid is that root, stem and leaf are not very differentiated. We learned that. Autotrophic mode of nutrition. We learned that it is freshwater or marine, or it can also be found on your moist stones, soil, wood, also in symbiotic relationship, and also on certain animals such as your sloth bear. Every line of NCERT I am covering for you, right? Then we have different shape and size. We learned about your colonial algae, that is Olvox, and we also learned about filamentous such as Ulothrix and Spirogyra are filamentous, and few marine forms can like kelps, which can go up to 100 meters tall. They can go up to 100 meters tall. That is your giant kelp. Then we also learned about your reproduction, that is fragmentation is your asexual. Fragmentation is going to be your vegetative. Yes, example is Spirogyra. Then we learnt about zoospores under asexual condition, and zoospore is found where? In the case of Chlamydomonas, that is motile spores. Then under sexual reproduction, we learnt about fusion of two gametes, where if the fusion of gametes is very same to each other, it is called as isogamy. Somewhere it's written there. See here, similar in size, Ulothrix, it's called as your isogamy. Yes, it's called as isogamy. If both are motile, example is going to be Ulothrix. If it is non-motile, example is going to be Spirogyra. Under isogamy, motile is Ulothrix, non-motile is Spirogyra. Then we learnt about anisogamy. Example was Eudorina. Yes, Eudorina here. Anisogamy. Then we learnt about oogamous, in which one is the bigger gamete, that is going to be female gamete, which is non-motile. One is a smaller gamete, which is motile. Example was Volvox and Fucus. Now, that was your entire thing which we covered till now. Any doubt till there, ask me right now, students. Ask me right now. Any doubt in the algae part which we learned till now? No doubt. Now, how do we classify the algae? Can we classify it based on the structure? No. Can we classify the algae based on habitat? No. Very variable. Can we classify your algae based on pigment? Yes. So, based on the pigment present here, we are classifying algae into 3 different classes here. That is based on the pigment. We have your Rhodophyceae because of the red pigment, Phaeophyceae because of the brown pigment such as your Fucoxanthin. We are dividing Chlorophyceae based on your green pigment, that is going to be your chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Clear? So chlorophyll A is a common pigment. We learned there, remember? We learned about the pigment there. Chlorophyll A is universal. Here. We learned here, right? Chlorophyll A is going to be very universal, all of them. Chlorophyll A is universal. Chlorophyll A. The other pigments might change. Now, based on the pigment, we have first type of algae called as your Chlorophyceae, also called as your green algae. Chlorophyceae or something called as your green algae. For example, habitat is mostly fresh water. Cell wall, did we learn there? Yes. Cell wall is, inner is going to be cellulose, outer is going to be pectin or pectose. Pigment is going to be chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, major pigment. Food storage we learned, starch as well as your oil droplets. It's not written, let me write it. As well as oil droplets. Yes. And this Chlorophyceae in the side chloroplast, within the chloroplast, we have certain structures called as pyrenoids. Now, these structures called as pyrenoids can actually show what? Storage of protein as well as your starch and oil droplets. Protein as well as your starch. That is called as pyrenoids. Now, the next thing someone can ask you is the storage food material that we learned right now. Now, examples: Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, Volvox, Pyrogyra and Cara. The only thing which is missing from here is Ulothrix. Let me also write that. Ulothrix. Now, what about the reproduction? Reproduction is going to be vegetative by fragmentation, asexual by zoospores, and sexual reproduction by isogamy. Anisogamy and oogamy. All 3 types of reproduction can be seen in the case of your Chlorophyceae. Clear? And here one more point which is missing here is the shape of chloroplast. That's right. Here in the case of Chlorophyceae, the chloroplast shape can vary. For example, the chloroplast shape can be cup-shaped in the case of Chlamydomonas. Do you see here? This is cup-shaped. That is your cup-shaped. I hope you cannot see that, so let me draw it again. Can you see? This is cup-shaped chloroplast. Chlamydomonas. Or the particular chloroplast can be discoid, C-shaped. Can you see C-shaped, ribbed, reticulate, see, like a web-like structure, spiral-shaped or stellate-shaped. Now, based on the chloroplast structure, we can actually divide different types of algae belonging to green algae. For example, they might give you an experiment. They'll give you a group of algae. You have to tell me which is which algae. That time you will tell, sir, this algae is Chlamydomonas because it has cup-shaped chloroplast. So, based on the shape of chloroplast, you can tell which particular algae is which one. Okay. Now, next one is your Phaeophyceae. Next one is going to be your Phaeophyceae. Chlorophyceae, didn't add that line. Okay. Next one is going to be your Phaeophyceae. It is mostly found in a marine. Cell wall we learnt. Cellulose and algine. See, I am not explaining everything again because we have already learnt it one before. Right? I believe I told about test series, right? Test series I did believe. I told you all about test series. Okay. Now, cell walls I told you, cellulose and algine we discussed there. Pigment is what? Chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, carotenoids, xanthophyll. Which type of xanthophyll? Fucoxanthin. And so listen to me very carefully. The concentration, based on the concentration of fucoxanthin, a particular algae will change its color. For example, if the fucoxanthin is very less, the algae will be somewhat, green color or somewhat light brown color, right? Olive green color. If the fucoxanthin concentration increases, it will become more and more brown in nature. More and more brown in nature. And this is brown algae, also called as your Phaeophyceae. Then we have food source material. We learned about mannitol and laminarin. Yes, which is a type of your carbohydrate. Examples is going to be ectocarpus, laminarin, fucus, sargassum and dictyota. Reproduction is all the three types: fragmentation, zoospores, isogamous, anisogamous and oogamous. And students, you don't have to write down the entire thing. All these notes will be available on the Telegram channel. That is Basavaraj Sir Biology. On my Telegram channel, the entire notes will be available. Okay? All these notes will be available. Now, one thing which is missing here is the shape and the structure of this brown algae. Students, your brown algae can vary very largely. For example, your brown algae can be simple and filamentous. Example is your ectocarpus. See here. It can be simple and filamentous. This is your ectocarpus. Very simple and filamentous, ectocarpus. Or your brown algae can be very tall. Just like in Avatar movie. Can you see this? Very tall, large, 100 meters tall. That is your giant kelps. They are your giant kelps. Giant kelps. 100 meters tall plants. 100 meters tall. Very tall. This is also your brown algae. This also is your brown algae. Okay? Brown algae. Now, one more point which I have to focus here is the structure again. Structure of your brown algae. Your entire structure of your brown algae can be divided into three parts. The first part is called as your hold fast. Now, hold fast is a structure which helps the brown algae to hold onto a substratum. Okay, any structure to make sure the algae doesn't fly. So, to make sure the algae doesn't go in water somewhere because of water current, this hold fast will allow for attachment to the substratum. Attachment. Then we have something called as your stipe, which is stem-like structure. Stipe is a stem-like structure. Then we have something called as leaf-like structure called as frond. A leaf-like structure called as frond, which is photosynthetic in nature. It is photosynthetic in nature. Okay, photosynthetic in nature. Now, the last one is going to be your Rhodophyceae. Rhodophyceae also called as your red algae. Here, again, habitat is marine. Greater concentration found in your warm waters. Yes, it can also be found in your ocean bed and also in the depths of the ocean. It can be found. Very variable. Cell wall is made up of cellulose. Also we know cellulose plus pectin plus carrageen and also polysulfide esters. All of you please write down here plus write down. Okay. Pigment is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll D and phycoerythrin as well as your phycoerythrin. Phycoerythrin is the pigment which imparts the red color to the algae. Then your first material, food storage material is going to be Floridian starch. Members is Polysiphonia, Gracilaria, Gillidium and Porphyra. Examples you need to remember at any cost. Then we have reproduction. Reproduction is very simple here. Listen to me. Fragmentation, spore formation. But under sexual reproduction, only oogamy type. Only and only oogamy type. Completely non-motile. Because remember here, your Rhodophyceae will have no flagella. Even the spores produced here are non-motile. You see here, non-motile spores. And non-motile spores are called as what? Aplanospores. So we have not zoospores, we have aplanospores here. Aplanospores. Extra point to remember. Aplanospores. Again, here, sexual reproduction is also non-motile. Why? No flagella. Flagella is completely absent. So that extra point everyone to remember about red algae. This is the entire table which can summarize your algae. So very important, one question will definitely come from here. See here, this is going to be your red algae. See red algae here, that is Porphyra as well as your Polysiphonia. Polysiphonia and Porphyra. Okay, Porphyra. Now, what about the life cycle, sir? What about the life cycle? How can we learn the life cycle, sir? Very simple again, students. There are 2 points to remember. First of all, if you don't know anything about life cycle, this is the day you learn today. The life cycle of your algae can be divided into 2 parts. The first part is called as your gametophytic stage. Gametophytic stage. Now, what is the meaning of gametophytic stage? Gametophytic stage is the stage in the life cycle of your algae which is very dominant. I'll give you a quick example. In the case of humans, this is my human body. Is it diploid or haploid? My entire body is going to be diploid. It is made up of somatic cells, diploid. But in the case of algae, the plant body is not diploid. The plant body is completely haploid, and it is the main stage and gamete bearing stage. So the main stage, the main plant body in the case of your algae is said to be what? Gametophytic. It is said to be gametophytic in nature. The same algae can also show a less predominant sporophytic also. And remember, sporophytic stage is always spore bearing and it is always diploid. Sporophytic is spore bearing, diploid. So gametophytic is haploid and your sporophytic stage is diploid in nature. It is diploid in nature. Now let's understand the life cycle, which is very important for you to solve some questions. Very important to solve some questions. For example, tell me, the main plant body is what? The main plant body, this is your algae. This is your algae. The main plant body in your algae is gametophyte. It is gametophyte in nature. And this is haploid in nature. Yes, it is haploid in nature. And this gametophytic plant body, it is green in color. Main algae when you see it is green in color, right? So if this algae is green in color, can it do photosynthesis? Yes. Is it independent? Also yes. So it is gametophyte and also independent in nature. It is independent in nature. Gametophyte body. It is independent in nature. Clear? Now this gametophytic plant body, can I write main plant body? All of you will forget otherwise. Main plant body. Main plant body. This is the main plant body, right? Main plant body. Now when this main plant body, students, when this main plant body undergoes mitosis, it produces the gametes. See, gametophyte will produce gametes. Gametophyte will produce the gametes, obviously. This is haploid in nature. This will also be haploid in nature. Why? Because of mitosis. Haploid in nature. Gametes. Now further, these gametes will fuse. Yes, the gametes will fuse. So can I tell fertilization? Fertilization? Yes, fertilization. When these gametes fuse together, they produce a structure called as your zygote. And zygote is said to be diploid in nature. The zygote is said to be diploid in nature. Clear? Zygote is said to be diploid in nature. Now students, this zygote undergoes meiosis. This zygote undergoes meiosis. Now once the zygote undergoes meiosis, it produces a structure called as your sporophyte. Structure called as your sporophyte. Now always remember, whenever there is meiosis, will there be change in ploidy? Yes. Diploid to haploid in nature. Diploid to haploid in nature. That is change in ploidy. Now this sporophyte, students, this sporophyte will eventually undergo again. One second. This is sporophyte, right? 2-1. Still, it is 2-1. Or sporophyte is diploid, still, right? 1 second. I think a small made a mistake. If it has to go, it has to go mitosis. Then only sporophyte will be formed, right? It has to undergo 1 second. Mitosis. Otherwise, the ploidy will change. See, That's why if you mug up, you might go mistake. See, sporophyte is always, remember I told you, diploid in nature. So it cannot undergo meiosis, it has to go under mitosis only. It has to undergo mitosis. It cannot go under meiosis because if it undergoes meiosis, it will become, ploidy will change, right? And we know sporophyte is diploid in nature. Very easy to catch the mistake easily. Because if the cycle will not complete then. Now this particular sporophyte, which is diploid in nature, I told you here, sporophyte is always diploid. This sporophyte will undergo meiosis now. This particular sporophyte will undergo meiosis. This particular sporophyte will undergo meiosis, and remember, sporophyte produces spores. It will produce the spores. Spores are haploid in nature now. See, meiosis now, diploid to haploid is happening. Diploid to haploid is happening. Now, this spores eventually undergo mitosis and produce your entire main plant body. So, ploidy is maintained everywhere. Ploidy is maintained everywhere. So, I know if you're studying this entire cycle for the first time, it can become a little confusing, but with practice you will understand. But there is a small twist here. Wait, small twist. This is supposed to happen in general in the case of a plant, but in the case of your algae, your particular zygote directly develops into the main plant body. In the case of your algae, your, one second. In the case of your algae, let me change the color. Your zygote directly produces your spores. In the case of algae, zygote directly produces spores. This entire sporophyte stage is not found usually. Usually not found. It is very short-lived and it is not found at all. So, your entire zygote can undergo meiosis. So, if you open your NCERT, it's written the zygote, let me change the color, very important point, very important point. This zygote can undergo something called as zygotic meiosis. During the formation of zygote, the zygote undergoes meiosis and directly produces the spores. Zygote is undergo meiosis to produce the spores. That is called as zygotic meiosis happening. Zygotic meiosis happening. This is the most important point. Zygotic meiosis happening. Clear? So we have gametophyte, main plant body, undergoes mitosis to produce your gametes. Gametophyte, gametes. Gametes undergo fertilization to produce the zygote. Zygote undergoes zygotic meiosis to produce spores. Spores undergoes mitosis to produce the gamete. That's your entire life cycle of your algae. Now let's come to economic importance. Now the main economic importance of your algae is nothing but your CO2 fixation. Almost half of the CO2 is fixed by your algae. Almost half the CO2 in the atmosphere is fixed by algae. And also during the process, O2 is also released. And the third one is your algae technically is a part of food chain, and it is a type of your primary producer in your grassland ecosystem. Primary producer in your, in aquatic mostly, it's aquatic, right? In aquatic ecosystem. In aquatic ecosystem, it is a primary producer. Apart from that, we also have your Gracilaria and Gelidium, which are used in your agar formation. Agar can be used in your microbiology, preparing jellies and ice cream. Then we also have Sargassum, Laminaria and Porphyra, which is used as a food. Then we also have Chlorella, which is your space food. It's called as space food. It is eaten by astronauts because it has a lot of protein in it. Yes, a lot of protein supplement. Then we also have your marine brown algae and red algae, which produces hydrocolloids like algin and carrageen. That is your economic importance. Yes, done. Let's see the important lines. Under your chlorophyce, what did we discuss? Under chlorophyce, we discussed it as green color in nature. It can be unicellular like your Chlamydomonas, or it can be colonial like your Volvox, or filamentous like your Spirogyra and Ulothrix, just Pyrogon Ulothrix. Then we also learn it has pigment is what? Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Chloroplast can change, that is cup-shaped, reticulate, plate-like, ribbon-shaped, spiral. We discussed that also. Yes, we discussed about pyrenoids. Pyrenoids can help you what? Pyrenoids can help you in what? Storage of proteins as well as storage of oil droplets and starch. See here, contains protein and besides starch. Some algae may store food in the form of oil droplets. We learned that. Green algae usually have a rigid cell wall made up of inner layer cellulose, outer layer of pectose. Vegetable reproduction usually takes place by fragmentation. Example is Spirogyra. Somewhere it's mentioned here, it's not mentioned here, okay. Asexual reproduction also happens with the help of zoospore formation. We learned in the case of Chlamydomonas. And we also learned about sexual reproduction which happens here. Yes. Some commonly found algae examples given here. Chlamydomonas, Volvox, Ulothrix, Spirogyra, Chiara. All the examples are given here. Now in the case of your rhodophyceae, we learnt about what? It's called as brown algae. Various size and shape form. That is, I told you, showed a diagram, remember? Branch filamentous ectocarpus to giant kelps. It's written here. Filamentous forms ectocarpus and profusely branched giant kelps which can go up to 100 meters tall. Yes. 100 meters, yes, 100 meters. They possess chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, carotenoids and xanthophyll. See, carotenoids and xanthophyll. Now, which type of xanthophyll? Tell me in the chat. Which type of xanthophyll? The xanthophyll which I am talking about here is fucoxanthin. It is fucoxanthin. See here. Variable from olive green to brown depending upon the amount of xanthophyll pigment. That is fucoxanthin. So remember students, fucoxanthin is a type of xanthophyll. NCERT line. Then we also learnt about your cellulosic wall. Yes. Food source material, laminarin and mannitol. Gelatinous coating called as algin, hydrocolloidal substance. Then we also learnt about the plant body. Yes, we learnt about plant body. That is stipe, which is your stalk. It has hold fast, which helps to hold the substratum. We also learnt about the photosynthetic organ called as frond, leaf-like structure. Then we also have your spores, asexual reproduction. Brown algae is biflagellated zoospores that are pear-shaped, also called as pyriform. Remember, we learned there the shape of the flagella. It is two unequal lateral attachment. In the case of your green algae, I think I missed out the point there. It was equal and apical in origin. Where it got it? Missed the point. Where is the flagella? It might be written somewhere. Might have missed it somewhere. It is written somewhere. Somewhere it is written. I just missed it, I guess. It's fine. All of you know. See, in the case of your chlorophyceae, it is going to be apical, equal, and 2 to 18 number. 2 to 18 number. Remember that. Okay. Then we have sexual reproduction by isogamous, anisogamous, and oogamous. Examples is going to be what? See, it's given. The gametes are pyriform, pear-shaped, and bear two lateral attached flagella. Commonly found in your ectocarpus, dictyota, laminarin, sargassum, and fucus. Examples. Then we have red algae. Red algae, I told you it's called as rhodophyceae is red algae because of the pigment which is phycoerythrin or phycoerythrin pigment. We discussed that also. Majority of the red algae is marine, greater concentration in the warmer water, right? Now, what is the solid food material? Is Floridian starch, which is a type of amylopectin and glycogen. Okay. Reproduction, vegetative by fragmentation. They reproduce asexual by, very important point, non-motile spores and sexually by non-motile gametes. Why? Because in the case of red algae, flagella is completely absent. Here, right? Sexual reproduction is oogamous and accompanied by complex development. See, Polysiphonia, Gracilaria, Porphyra, and Gelidium. Examples are going to be important. They will ask you questions directly from the examples. They will not even think twice. Okay. See here. Then we learned about economical importance. Here, hydrochloric substance. Half of the total carbon dioxide fixation. CO2 fixation. Algae throughout being photosynthetic, they increase the level of dissolved oxygen in the immediate environment. level of increase in your O2. Then we also learnt about your primary producers in your aquatic ecosystem. Yes, in aquatic animals. Then we also learnt about your algin, gelidium and gracilaria, which produces your jelly. Then carrageen we learnt in the case of your red algae. Then we also learnt about your ice cream jellies, that is gelidium again. Chlorella, unicellular protein used by food supplement, even by the space travelers. I told you, space food, which is chlorella. The algae is divided into three main categories: rhodophyceae, chlorophyceae, rhodophyceae. That we get into it. There is your entire algae part. Entire algae. Not even one line of NCERT is missed out. You made notes, you will get the notes. Solve some questions. See the question, first question. Which of the following undergoes meiosis in algae? We just now learnt. In the case of an algae life cycle, your meiosis happens where? The meiosis happens in the zygote stage, called as zygotic meiosis. So what is the answer? Answer is going to be zygote. Then we have an algae has a thallus body of an only green color? No. We have red color, we have brown color. Moss-like body with simple shoots? No. It is thalloid in nature, there is no shoot. Plant body with a distinct shoot? No. It is thalloid. So answer is going to be none of the above. None of the above. Next question. Which of the following is colonial algae? Very easy. Volvox. Volvox. In kelp, the plant body is usually attached to the substratum by the help of? Attached to the substratum with the help of? Hold fast. Hold fast. Frond is going to be leaf-like structure. Stipe is going to be the stalk. Is going to be the stalk. Yes. There it is, students. Your entire algae part is covered. Entire algae part is covered in 1 hour 20 minutes. Not just covering the entire algae with notes, written notes, and explaining the phylogenetic relationship, explaining the classification. We also made sure we learn the NCERT lines. So students, there it is for today's class. Let me know in the comment section today. Do not forget to comment down that how was the class and did you learn something, or if you have any doubt regarding your algae part, let me know in the comment section today. And if you are new to the channel, quickly subscribe to the channel and also hit the like button right now. And if this video gets good views and comments, I'll make the second part about bryophytes and pteridophytes. In second part, we'll do bryophytes and pteridophytes in similar fashion. All the notes plus NCERT plus questions. So with that being said, I'll take off right now. Before I go, students, if you have any doubt regarding your NEET counseling or NEET related doubts, there is a helpline number where you can talk to Shreyas sir all the time, or his team is there. The link, how can you talk to the helpline number? It is given in the description. So go to the description, click on the link and take advantage of it. So with that being said, thank you so much, students, and I'll see you in the next class. I know a lot of re-NEET that is happening, but whatever the decision is, you have to be prepared. That is why on this channel, we are not wasting a single day and we are starting your NEET journey right now for NEET 2025. So with that being said, my name is Baswaraj sir, your biology master teacher, taking off. Bye bye, students.